Hello, beautiful people. This is Rajeev, and welcome back to Photo Country with Rajeev. This is episode number 46. For this episode, I interviewed Sasikanth Somu. He's a teacher-practitioner of analog photography in Auroville, Pondicherry. I got to know him through another podcast guest that I interviewed before, Madhavan Paradiswamy, and I found Sasikanth's feed through Madhavan's feed. And it's interesting because his background in photography and the kind of photography he does, his insights into teaching analog photography and how digital and analog can coexist, and what he thinks is the future for the analog type of photography holds is what we are going to discuss in this podcast chat. It's an interesting chat, and I look forward to hearing from you guys as to what you think about this podcast in general and this episode specifically. So without further ado, let's get into the conversation. Hey Sasi, thanks a lot for coming on the podcast. We've been playing phone tag or email tag or Instagram tag, I don't know what to call it.
Yes.
And finally we are here. Touchwood, the internet should not kick us out till the end of this conversation. So on that note, let's start this chat.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be on here. And it's a bit of a birthday gift, being my birthday today. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Happy birthday, Sasi. How old are you? Oh, can I ask you that?
I'm not ashamed to say my age. I'm 57 today.
Awesome. That's 57 trips around the sun.
It's the one way of looking at it. Yes.
Yes. So that's just 57, right? Still more trips around the sun.
It's still a blend.
Yes. Awesome. So absolute pleasure talking to you. I understand that you're in Pondicherry, that too in Auroville.
Yes.
Can we start by telling us a little bit about what you're doing at present at Auroville, Pondicherry?
I grew up in Pondicherry. Photography has always been my interest, right from when I was growing up. I actually went to school in Kunnur. Kunnur is a hill station not far from Pondicherry in Tamil Nadu. And while I was there, I used to have a lot of people visit. People from the plains would come, relatives, so on. So one such time, one of my uncles was visiting, but in those days, not everybody had cameras and so on. So he was wondering whether he could find a camera to be able to photograph his time there. And some of my grandmother dug into the cupboard and brought out believe it or not, a Kodak box brownie that she'd been carrying around for I don't know how long. So we took it to the camera shop and they managed to load a roll of film. I was only about 10 years old. And so we went around and took whatever photos we could with that camera. And then when we got back to the lab, they gave us a contact sheet of the prints, not the original size, but like a thumbnail contact sheet of the photos we'd taken. And one look at that contact sheet, and I think I was hooked. It was just absolutely magical. Those small stamp-sized photos. And ever since, I've always been obsessing with photography. And I was lucky that my dad was a very photo nut, so to speak. He photographed us as little kids with this Rolleiflex. But unfortunately, by the time I grew up, we had gotten rid of the Rolleiflex due to financial constraints and so on. So I didn't get to experience a Rolleiflex yet. But anyway, so he encouraged me to take up photography. And one of the first second-hand cameras he got me was a Mamiya Secor or something like that with the wide-angle lens. So that was the only lens I had. So I went and photographed all my friends, and having a camera hanging around your neck opened doors. In those days, if you had a camera, they would welcome you. Even if you're a total stranger, they would still welcome you and treat you like royalty. You get soji bhaji and coffee and everything.
Yeah, you're the cool kid of the block.
Exactly. I'd get invited to political meetings and NCC meetings and all that, and treated. So then later on, when I finished school, I thought, okay, photography is such a great part of my life. I might as well do something more with it. So I tried to find places where I could study. In fact, at the end of the street, there used to be a Star Studios, a photographic studio, where they did passport photos and family photos and portraits and all that. I used to go and hassle those guys. There were two brothers who were running it, and I used to hassle them to teach me, to show me especially what happened in the dark room. There's always a mystery what happened in the dark room. So they would take me in there and show me, and then take me to a local restaurant and buy me a dosa for breakfast and stuff like that. Yeah, unfortunately, even though the studio is still around, both the brothers have passed away for whatever reason. They were really nice chaps. So things kind of happened like that. And then when I was about 19, I had an opportunity to go to Australia to study. So I shifted to Australia, and initially I studied engineering, but didn't enjoy it very much. So I quit. I went to work. And while I was working, I was still trying to get into photography. And I first had to do a diploma to be able to strengthen my portfolio, which then allowed me to get into a degree. The degree was called Media Arts, and photography was my major. And I did film cinema as an elective. This was at RMIT in Melbourne. And once I finished that, this was about the mid-90s. And once I finished that, I didn't know what to do with myself because I did fine art photography. It wasn't the commercial field, so I couldn't quite support myself with photography. So I thought, okay, I also had some interest in education, pedagogy and so on. So then I thought, okay, let me become a teacher. And that's what I did. I qualified as a teacher. And I've been teaching art and photography and design and graphic design and so on ever since. And around about early 2000, I had an opportunity to come back to India for other reasons. And there was something within me that always wanted to come back. So I jumped on that escape and came back. And when I came back here, I had some time, came to do some projects in Auroville, which is an international community just close to Pondicherry. And then I've been here ever since. This was 2007. So I've been here close to 15 years. And I started teaching in one of the Auroville schools. And there I teach photography, art and design. And my main interest has been analog photography. So I always stuck to doing that. I mean, I do digital also. Not that I have anything against it. I really enjoy the convenience of it. In a lot of areas, I think the digital is far more convenient. But I mainly teach analog also. I also do workshops for adults. And so I have a lot of youngsters coming from Chennai, Bangalore, Trichy, somebody even from Delhi wanted to come to do analog workshop so that they can acquaint themselves with the traditional form of photography. So that's basically my life in a nutshell from about 1980s to now.
Right. So in terms of your teaching in Auroville, do you teach only analog or do you teach both, like general, just conceptually photography?
The idea is to, the curriculum I run is I take them to the history of photography and the evolution of the camera. And they start by doing a pinhole camera, and then photograms, and then they use the digital camera to learn the technicalities about using the aperture and the shutter speed and so on, because there they can see the results straight away and make the adjustments. And then they get introduced to the film camera also. And then depending on their interests, some of them want to continue using a film camera and some of them continue with digital. And once in a while, they kind of jump from this bank to that bank, so to speak. And there are some kids who, social media is a huge influence on them. So they see some photos somebody has posted using expired film. So then all of a sudden they want to experiment with expired film. So it carries on like that. So there's no hard and set rules. It's up to them what they want to, and I'm there to facilitate in the robot. Yeah.
And this is school students or?
Yes, this is high school from 9th grade to 12th.
Okay. Do you have students who have taken that up as professionally as well? Like how's the results been?
I have one student who's actually studying in university at the moment. He's studying visual communication. I've had another student went on to do film studies. He was interested in filmmaking. And then there are other students who still have other jobs, but also do some photography. So like a hack, like a side job. So things like that. But the chap who's studying visual communication, I think once he finishes, then he will be drawn into photography, I think. Yeah.
Right.
But coming out of Auroville, it's very difficult for them. They don't have many opportunities, so they have to go overseas to study because a lot of the people here are from other countries, So the European kids will go back to Europe to do their studies. Only the Indian kids will try to get into Indian universities. But now even the Indian kids are wanting to go and study in the European universities because there are some universities in especially places like Holland and Germany that are facilitating or making it easier for them to come and study with very low tuition fees and offering courses in English that are interesting to them and so on. So that also is kind of happening. Yeah.
But what about photography studies in India? I know there's a specialized photography school in Ooty and there's one in Goa, but
That is, yeah,
I'm not.
quite a lot.
I don't know if other places that teach photography as a vocation, either commercially or in any other way.
There's quite a lot now. Any of cities that offer visual communication will have photography as a stream. And also, there are a lot of private institutions that are also teaching photography. I mean, obviously, they will charge a premium for that. But the opportunities are there now. There's also a NIFT, I think, NIFT, National Institute of Film and Television, also teach photography. I know somebody who studied photography from there and graduated, who's a photographer working in Auroville. So the opportunities now to study photography are far more than when I was growing up.
But what about film? I mean, in today's instant world, like we were discussing before, you raised an interesting point where film is almost like a antithesis of what they face, like instant glory, instant gratification, and so on. Whereas in film, you have a limitation in the number of frames you can shoot. Plus, you don't know how it will turn out. There are so many variations to that. How are the students reacting to that?
Yeah, it's a very interesting situation because I also do workshops for adults because I've set up a community dark home where I take my students when they're in class, and then the rest of the time in the dark home, I teach analog photography to adults. And some of even though I say adults, they're still youngsters. They're in the early 20s and late teens and so on. So when I give them a roll of film, and for my particular workshop, I don't give them a full 36 shots. I give them somewhere between 18 and 20 shots. And I give them a whole morning to shoot and come back. And even though these people are familiar with digital and probably only been shooting digital all their lives, when I give them a roll of this many shots, sometimes they come back even without finishing it. They say, I couldn't finish it, which I find very surprising. And they say, no, it still is so precious. We don't want to waste it on just random shots. So there seems to be some effect that it has on them when I give them a roll of film. As I was saying, they seem to be going through some sort of digital fatigue where they shoot thousands and thousands of images on their phones and on their SD cards and so on, and don't even have the time to go through and sort them out properly. And when they shoot 1,000, they might like only one or two. So in those sorts of instances, when they have only a limited number of shots, it makes them really think carefully about their shots. And the fact that they can't see it immediately also, I think, plays a part in them wanting to concentrate on taking a good shot. And it seems to be working, and I'm very happy with that. And that seems to be also the attraction for these students to want to at least dabble in analog photography. Not necessarily take it up on a full time, but at least learn what it's about and what the qualities it can produce. And some of them do want to take it further. Like I said, some students, they've seen shots of expired film photography, which has a crazy effect, and then they want to shoot expired film and things like that. I had a few years ago, I had two students who finished their whole exam in analog, in black and white photography. They did the O-level and their A-level in using film. So, and those students still dabble in film. They have their mobile phones, of course, which is dominant, I should say, in all the photos that they take. But they also have analog cameras and special projects they do using their analog cameras. So it's there's space for both worlds, I think. This world has space for both of those mediums. And of course, when they shoot, some of them don't want to print in the darkroom. So we scan it, then of course they can use it to do whatever they want after it's scanned, whether they want to load it to social media or enlarge it and so on. So both of that is possible.
I think a couple of interesting points here, because I always believe that you need to shoot with intent. Even when you have a digital camera in my hand, when I go out and shoot, I have a vision in my head and I try to basically figure it out. So I end up coming back with one or two shots at the most, which is second like keepers. I guess you're sort of forced into that scenario when you have film.
Yes, exactly. This is what Ansel Adam talks about. He calls it pre-visualization. You need to have an idea of what your end photo has to look like. And your work is in trying to get there because your initial shot may not be as good as the image you have in your head. So, and you can do the same with the digital also, except you would probably be using Photoshop while we'll be in the dark room with the enlargers and dodging and burning and all this sort of stuff. So the work is the same. It's the end result that matters.
Absolutely. In fact, there's one photographer called Tor Egeland. He's a Norwegian photographer.
Yeah.
And I interviewed him on this podcast, and he's 90 years old. And he was in Cuba, in Havana, when Fidel Castro rolled in with his troops.
Okay.
And he shot his first speech. Can you imagine?
My God.
And I asked him, and he's gone on this incredible journeys all over the world. He was a National Geographic photographer, Aramco photographer, traveled the Badlands of Saudi Arabia at that time.
Yes.
Carrying his, and he's even met marsh Arabs of Iraq. Now they're, in fact, I think Saddam Hussein drained those marshes, and if you recall, and destroyed a whole way of life when he actually captured them on film. And he then actually graduated into digital as well after that.
Okay.
And he said, what is the main sort of difference between this and the digital and analog? And he says, I spend a lot more time shooting when I was shooting analog, but I find I sit before the computer a lot more time when I'm doing digital because I'm shooting more and I don't know which one is.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think, I think your quality is more important than shooting like a madman with a machine gun. I've been seeing your feed on Instagram, and I see a lot of patterns, like textures. That's what pops up to me from what I see. I'm not sure. Is that what you like to shoot? What is your what are the kind of images you try to capture?
I'm not necessarily aiming for textures. It's just that my subject that I've been doing in the last few years is trees. I've been trying to photograph a lot of trees around Auroville. We have some amazing greenery around here because Auroville, when it started, was just a flat land. There was nothing here, no trees. There was only one banyan tree and so on. So the people who came to start Auroville planted a lot of trees. And then over the 40, 50 years, they've all literally like a real small forest here. And some of these trees may not be native, but they're still beautiful in themselves. We have this African variety called kaya, and it's amazing bark and so on. So I've been kind of smitten by that beauty. So I've been trying to photograph a lot of the trees. Even now I'm still doing another series. I did one lot and I had an exhibition, and then I'm working on another one now. So obviously with the trees, with the bark and the leaves and the branches and everything, there is a lot of texture. So it's not necessarily the texture that I'm aiming for, but it's the whole package. Yeah.
Right. And the other photograph that I really... Yeah, go ahead. What were you saying?
But I'm curious about the pattern idea. So I'm going to go back and look at my feed and see how...
I'm actually scrolling through your feed right now. It's...
Okay.
Because I guess from my point of view, if you look at your feed, a lot of trees, branches, and that essentially to me says pattern, right? Because nature is full of patterns, right? Your leaves, branches, your textures, your bark, they're all patterns of some sort. And that's what I see. And essentially when you then pull out the color, it's just tone, right? It's just a gray tone, and shapes jump out because they're just tones.
Yes.
And black and white becomes a cacophony of shapes, lines and stuff like that, right? There's one photographer I think you will definitely like. He's a mobile phone photographer. He's from LA. I also interviewed him during COVID actually. And his feed is called Dazed and Confused. I'll send you the link. And he's a professional drummer, musician, and he shoots LA on his phone, and he somehow works on it, and they're just monochrome and just shadow and like silhouettes. There are people there, but you cannot see their faces.
I think I've heard of him. Somebody also mentioned him to me. Yeah.
Right? Okay. I actually interviewed him on this podcast. So you should listen to him.
Yeah.
So I've interviewed a lot of film photographers, in fact. And there's one, because there's a very strong...
I feel like heading on hallowed ground.
There's a lot of film artists on this channel. You should go check out. I'll send you some links of other film photographers I've interviewed. And there are guys, there was one guy called Tim D. Film. His portraits are amazing. He does street photography with the 8x8.
Oh my God. Okay. Okay, can you?
Yeah, it's just outdoor portraits with 8x8 and this thing. And he's just amazing. Amazing. Those sorts it's a wide variety of film photographers. One guy I interviewed was a solar can photographer.
Okay.
Have you heard of solar can photography?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he does that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like
it's almost but the thing is you take a Pepsi can, you put you take off the top, you put film and a hole and you tie it on a tree and leave it for 3 months.
Yes, it's pinhole photography. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. But the thing there is that you're actually co-creating an image along with nature.
Yeah, exactly.
6 months, you're actually seeing all you'll see is the line of the sun rising and setting. And as the sun, as the day moves, the sun rises or lowers based on which season you are in.
Exactly.
We have the weather interacts with it, the emulsion, and that creates its own texture. So it's just amazing what you can do with film. It's not unidimensional as people think it is.
Absolutely. Yeah. I met a young lady from Australia, Melbourne, Australia. She was visiting Auroville and she grows mushrooms. But then when she finishes a roll of film, she puts it in the mushroom bed for a week or so, and all the mycelium get into the emulsion. And then when she processes it, the S6 is just incredible. I'll send you a link also for you to have a look at. So experiments like that is endless. There's other people who do, I think they call it film soap or something like that, where they put the whole roll of film into some liquid and then take it out and then process it. So even when I was in university, I remember we used to do all sorts of stuff, scratch the negative and put acid on it. And it's just, endless. Yeah.
Awesome. And so what were your inspirations growing up? Did you have like your heroes, like looking up like Ansel Adams, as you talked about? Did you have, who are your favorites?
Well, the first hero photography wise is probably my dad. Like I said, he had a Rolleiflex and he used to shoot all of us as kids. All of childhood photos are all shot on Rolleiflex. I mean, in those days, there was only black and white and some color also, but they're all square 6x6 Rolleiflex shots. And he basically introduced me to photography and the technicalities of using the shutter speed and the aperture and so on. And more importantly, was very encouraging. I would shoot roll after roll and he would send it off to the lab and pay for it and get the photos back and so on. And would be just as enthusiastic in looking at them because he was always curious to see what I was doing. So he probably is my first inspiration. Then, of course, once I got into university, there was a whole heap of people that we got introduced to, starting with Ansel Adams and Edward Weston, Alvin Stiglitz, and Sally Mann, and Cindy Sherman, and Barbara Kruger. And so, I mean, all of them play some role in how they shape your view, the way you look at things. And I mean, I could go on and on. There's so many of them. And even today, there's quite a lot of people coming up much, much younger than me that are doing amazing work. And it's really a field where there is the inspiration is endless. And just all you have to do is find the right sites, because a lot of stuff that's posted on social media is rubbish, but you need to be very discerning and look very carefully. And then, of course, when you talk to people like you who have recommendations, met and spoken to and seen work of other people, that always helps also.
Right. We talked about the relevance of film in today's world. How do you see it coexisting with the digital space with the Mid Journey and ChatGPT coming in? How do you see it coexisting?
See, living here in India, accessing film and analog photography stuff is difficult. There's not many companies that sell them anymore. All the companies that used to make them in India itself closed down. Hindustan Photos, and there was another place in Ooty that also used to make film and photographic paper. Sterling, I think the brand name was called, but they've all closed down. So for me to get all the stuff to keep my hobby going or my teaching going, from Germany. I've imported from Germany or asked people to bring when they come. So that side is difficult. But also what's encouraging at the moment is there seems to be a bit of a revival in the interest in analog photography. And when I say analog photography, I'm not talking only about film photography. I'm talking about all other processes like cyanotype. Cyanotype seems to be taking off. I literally every day I see some cyanotype workshop or cyanotype classes being advertised. And then there are other people who are dabbling in gum bichromate and other alternative processes. I mean, we call them alternative processes now, but once upon a time, they were the only photographic processes that existed. So all that is going on side by side. And there are people closely want to deal only with that particular type, or there are people who dabble in both and so on. Though I feel encouraged by the revival, I somehow don't feel it's going to last forever. I think there will come a time when probably will completely disappear and digital will be the only process. But then even in digital, there are certain things happening. For example, like just yesterday or the day before, in one of the WhatsApp groups where we are all analog photographers, somebody had posted a news item where they are creating like a film roll, but from the film roll, when you pull it out, it's like a digital sensor. So you can put the film roll in your analog camera, pull it across and close the camera, and you've just, inserted a digital sensor into your analog camera, and that records. So this is a bit of a hybridization or something like a hybridization. So that also is happening. So you can use your old film camera to shoot film or stick a digital sensor in there and have digital photo. So it's difficult to predict how and where it will go. But for my part, I think one of the main reasons I'm doing a lot of the analog is to try and keep it alive and introduce it to people who are not aware of it, not familiar with it, just so that they can also experience this process. I mean, think about it. Essentially, you use light to create an image on this photographic paper or the photographic negative. I mean, it's nothing short of alchemy. We're using all these chemicals. So it's an amazing process. I mean, I'm incredibly grateful to the people who invented it and worked on it and perfected it. You know what I mean? It's an amazing process. Yeah. And without there is no photography. I mean, we need to acknowledge that. And so the use of these processes allows that. I think that's one of the points I forgot to mention. When they take a film camera, they really look at the light, because it is the light that's going to convert into an image in their photo, because it's reflecting off all these objects. So between shooting madly with the mobile phone and shooting with an analog camera, then they get to see what kind of light exists in that frame before they take the shot. So all that is difficult to predict where it's going to go. But so far, I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I love the process. It's more the process than the end result. And I will keep going as long as I can, I guess. Yeah.
I think you raised a very interesting point where it's not the camera, but the light. So it's a very real thing. People tend to forget that, right? They focus a lot on the camera and forget that this thing called light. Without that, this camera has no job.
Exactly.
So yeah, I mean, it's very interesting, because even if for example, if you take portrait photography or food or whatever, the image is actually formed by the quality of light, and it's all about how you actually sculpt and shape the light to create the image that you want.
Yes.
And the camera is just there on the tripod. I'm not going to change the setting or anything. I'm just changing the light and nothing on the camera. So it's very interesting, where I'm spending more time in sculpting the light rather than touching anything.
Yeah.
No.
That's the title of Andrei Tarkovsky's book. He wrote a book about filmmaking, and that's what he calls it. He calls it sculpting in time. Sorry, he calls it sculpting in time, which is film, motion picture. But photography is essentially sculpting with light. That's very astute point.
Yeah. Because the episode that I'm just going to release with my friend Karthik, he was a photographer who became a storyteller. So I think my personal feeling is that all photographers, all image makers are storytellers. We are telling stories in single images and putting a narrative together.
Exactly.
While a filmmaker tells it in 24 frames.
Exactly.
But essentially the processes are the same.
Hey, that's right. Yeah. I mean, the story can be also a series of images. You could have 10 images telling a story in still photography. And of course, in motion picture, it's 24 or 25 frames per second. And then, absolutely. I mean, when you look at an image, even if it's a single image, there is something that happened before and there's something that's going to happen after, whatever the image might be. When all that plays through your head when you're looking at the image, apart from the other side, the technicalities and so on. How did he take this photo, or how did she take this photo? What camera did she use? What lens did she use? Sometimes you get too stuck on that, I think, instead of concentrating more on the story and the light and so on. Yeah.
Right. So kind of bookending this conversation, one final question. If somebody wants to take up film photography, I don't know, as a hobby or want to learn, what will you tell them? Like, what he or she needs to start with? What are the 5 or 10 things that they have to keep in mind?
Good question. I mean, there's as soon as I heard the question, I was tempted to say that hopefully they have a good budget. Things are getting very expensive. What used to be next to nothing, you could pick up for a home. Now, because of this revival in analog photography, everybody seems to want to charge a hell of a lot of money. Like, for example, one of the things I'm also doing apart from teaching is I'm importing film and trying to market it. But it's become so expensive that people can't afford it. So you need to have a good budget, and you can start simple, something like a Pentax A1000 or a Pentax Podomatic, or even a Minolta SRT 101. These are all very basic, but really sturdy, long-lasting cameras. You could pick up a second-hand camera for maybe even about $100 and film. Yeah. And I mean, I would recommend them to try doing home processing. I think home processing is more interesting than sending it away. Because I mean, if you're going to do it, you might as well do the whole package, I feel, rather than do just one bit and outsource the other bit to somebody else. And you're lucky if you're able to find the things. But then in today's world, there's all these other chemicals like caffeinol. I don't know if you've heard of caffeinol, where they use coffee to develop their film. It's
interesting.
Yeah. It's a combination of instant coffee. It has to be instant coffee. It can't be ground beans. So it's instant coffee, vitamin C, and baking soda.
Wow.
You use it in a certain ratio. And there's actually a book out there called the Caffeinol Cookbook. So you mix it in a certain ratio and then you develop it like you normally do. So you can use that to develop your film. It's cheap. Do it at home. It's ecological. You can just pour it out down the sink. You don't have to have a special way of getting rid of the chemicals. And you have a processed film. Well, of course, you'll have to fix it. There you would have to use a regular fixer. But at least for the processing part, you can just use caffeinol. There's also beer and all. You can use beer.
Interesting. Now you're talking.
One for processing and one for, lighting. So that's also possible. So there's so many chemicals that they can use from your home kitchen. And if they have a digital camera or even if they mobile phone, they can scan it and convert it from negative to positive. And they use it in social media because most of the photos end up on social media anyway. At least for a start, they could kind of follow some of these simple steps to get into analog. Yeah. And there's endless amount of material online. Endless. There's so many people who have YouTube channels, show how to process, how to scan, how to preserve your negatives and things like that. So it's very easy to do. And I would recommend able to try it out at least for a little while just to learn the process and get to know how light really affects photography. Yeah.
And do you teach these processes online, or is it only in person?
Only in person. I haven't tried to teach it online. Yeah. I mean, like I said, there's already many people having channels that teach it. So I don't want to be another voice in that cacophony, so to speak. And some of them are doing a great job. So
Right.
I don't need.
Where can people come and see your work? Is it only on Instagram, or do you have a portfolio online somewhere?
No, I haven't. I've been meaning to get some sort of a website going with my photos, but I haven't had the time yet. So, but mainly at the moment, it's only on Instagram.
Okay. All right. I'll put the
Please. No problem.
in the show notes. So grateful for you to spare the time for this conversation, Sasi.
But please stay in touch. So let's keep talking.
Yes. So that's a wrap for episode number 46 with Sasikanth Somu. I hope you guys liked it, and I enjoyed putting this together for you. But you must have noticed that there are a lot more video chats coming up, and I'm pretty excited about sharing the videos of my podcast chats, and henceforth all my episodes will be available both in video and audio format. I hope you like this episode. Please like, share, and follow this podcast. Do sign up for my Substack channel, which is photocountry.substack.com. Thanks for hanging out till the end of this conversation. So I'm deeply appreciative of that. Each one of you who has done that. I hope you can stick around for the next episode, which will, I'll drop it in a week. So catch you there. Bye-bye.